Let's do another edition of the basketball show. This is the one getting us ready for another big weekend. She's Taylor Korn. I'm Jim Dunaway as we get ready for what is turning in for what has already been another week of great SEC basketball. Before we even talk about Saturday, I'll tell you, coming up, we're going to talk about Tennessee, Auburn, the big rivalries, maybe some concerns for Auburn. We'll update you on Johni Broome. We'll talk about Alabama's 100-point run back at home against LSU, some Bama concerns. But I don't feel like, Taylor, we can start without looking in the rearview mirror to what was maybe the most exciting Wednesday night of SEC basketball ever.
It was insane. It was insane. And if any of you watched the next round earlier today, y'all mentioned this, but Peter Burns tweeted a statistic after all three SEC games, all three Wednesday night SEC games were completed. And Georgia, Ole Miss, and South Carolina led for 119 minutes and 14 seconds of the 120 total minutes of play in those three games. All three of them lost. That has to be some sort of historical event that needs to go down in history books, and kids need to learn about it in school.
46 seconds is all the three teams that won the game led that night. It was amazing. The biggest contest was Texas A&M and Ole Miss, and it probably was the biggest heartbreaker because Ole Miss is up 2 at the line with the basketball and very few seconds left on the clock. Dude misses a free throw, and then A&M comes down, hits a three, and then Ole Miss can't score. And just those few seconds, about 11 seconds, A&M steals a top 25 road win. That's a heartbreaker for Ole Miss and a big win for Texas A&M. That was to me, of the three, that was the craziest of them all because A&M didn't lead until then.
Right. And that is the epitome of it. I quoted Peter Burns' tweet, and I said, "It ain't over till it's over." Because the last 30 seconds of a basketball game can take 10 minutes sometimes. I mean, it's foul after foul, it's free throws. Obviously, once you go up, you're not fouling anymore, but heartbreaker. I was heartbroken for South Carolina.
Oh, yes.
Like, that hurt my heart. I was happy for the Arkansas players just because, they hadn't won a conference game yet. Their freshman star, Boogie Flan, earlier this week, news broke, he's out for the year with a thumb injury. He had to have surgery. And everyone was probably counting them out, and they were probably counting themselves out a little bit just because of the downward trajectory of how their season was going. So I was happy for them that they pulled that out. Heartbreaker for South Carolina because they were leading a really good Florida team for a long time, the majority of the game, almost the entire game, and now they remain winless in conference play.
They led by 14 points late in that game and still ended up losing. And that's coming off a game they played Auburn really close. So against number 1 and number 5 at home, South Carolina had their chances. You said Arkansas got the win back on Tuesday night. Alabama beat Vandy. Tennessee got back in winning ways, beat Mississippi State, and Texas starting to build a resume. They got a big win over Missouri. So that's what has happened. We're looking ahead to the big weekend, and we'll start with where game day is going to be. Auburn playing host to Tennessee. You'll be down there for game day. You've got your credentials ready to go, and then a big delay where you'll go get your Byron's barbecue, and then you'll go into Neville for a 7:30 tip. We'll start with Johni Broome, his health. You were on the news conference this afternoon with Bruce Pearl. What did Bruce Pearl say on Thursday about Johni Broome's health for Saturday?
I'm just going to read the direct quote, and then I'm going to point out one part of it that stuck out to me. But it was the first question he was asked, and I don't think that will come as a surprise to anyone. But he was just asked for an update. It was a very, broad question. And Bruce said, "We practiced this afternoon, and there's a possibility he'll try and practice, but we're not sure. I'll obviously know more tomorrow and Saturday. I don't know whether he's questionable or probable, but I do know he's going to try and move around a little bit today, and we'll just have to wait and see how he does." Now, what stands out to me about that, and I might be speculating, I might be reading way too deep into this, is the fact that he said, "I don't know whether he's questionable," or he said possible. I think it's probable. And that's in terms of the SEC availability report that all the teams are required to submit during conference play. He didn't say out.
He did.
That could be pure speculation and me, reading way too deep into this, but that's what stood out to me is there was no, I don't know if he's going to be out or probable or questionable. It was questionable or probable. Am I being too much of a detective here?
No, not at all, because those are the words we are taught to use. So out is out. Questionable, you leave a wiggle room for yourself that you can go all the way up to game time. Questionable, game time decision, and you're able to drop him out there with no harm, no foul. Probable is usually an indication he's going to play. So that's probably too big of a word to use in this situation. We had Stephen Pearl on the next round earlier this week. You should go watch that fantastic interview, get a sneak peek of his daughter who jumped in on the interview with us as well. He made a point that they're not going to play Johni until Johni is 100% healthy, until Johni believes he's 100% healthy. And Auburn keeps winning. There's no need for them to rush him back. But Johni wants to play because it's Tennessee, first off. There's a nice rivalry between Auburn and Tennessee, unspoken rivalry between these two programs because they're two teams that are at the top of the standings in modern day SEC basketball year in and year out. Throw Alabama in there, and those are sort of the three teams that run the league right now. So Johni wants to play. GameDay is going to be there. It's the main ESPN crew. It's the biggest game in the country, primetime ESPN. So just the baller he is. He'd love to be in there, and Auburn could use him, but they've been winning without him. I'll ask you this question, though. I said it this week. And so this, to me, could water this game down a little bit and probably put me in the category of not wanting to rush Johni back. And this was misinterpreted by some people, but I really believe this in my heart, that Auburn could lose 4 SEC games, any 4, over the rest of the regular season, which would still make them an amazing 14-4 because they're unbeaten in the SEC right now. And I don't even think they would be snipped off the one line. There'll be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, even with 4 more losses. In fact, probably could lose 5 and not drop off the one line. And that's in a tremendous SEC. It's because of the work that Auburn has done already. Where they sit right now is the nation's #1 overall seed. It's Auburn, small gap Duke, a team that beat Auburn, and then a large gap for the other 2 #1 seeds. I think Duke and Auburn have so much wiggle room. I want your thoughts on there's a lot of leash for Auburn, even if they happen to drop a game or 2 or 3 or 4, to still be a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Am I crazy about that?
I don't think you're crazy at all just because of how difficult they scheduled in the non-conference, which you mentioned. Their resume, their strength of record, which I actually sent something out on the Next Round social media earlier. It's an ESPN, basically, analytics-based metric system. And their strength of record is incredible, as is Alabama's, as is, the majority of the SEC. I think that helps. And when you talk about, dropping however many regular season games, think about the fact that the teams that they would be losing to are all very talented.
Yeah.
Because like we said to start the show, the SEC, it's a gauntlet. No one is safe in the SEC. That's what I keep saying, because no one is. There's no easy game. There's no cupcake game. And so I think that also helps in terms of losing. I don't know how many bad losses you would consider an SEC loss, if any, because of how strong the conference is.
Yeah, and I would say this too. Alabama's already got 1 loss at home, which is bigger than losing on the road. But I think Alabama, who is also mentioned for not a #1 overall, but a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament, I think they could lose 3, possibly 4 games in the conference and still be in play. I think the SEC realistically in play. I mean, I feel like 2 is almost a given. 2 #1 seeds out of this league. I think there is a real possibility the NCAA tournament could have Duke and 3 SEC teams as the #1 seed when we get to Selection Sunday. And then maybe 2 more on the 2 line. So there is a lot of basketball to be played, losses to be had out there. And there are some people around the country that think 2-loss Tennessee, who comes rolling in with a 4-2 record to take on unbeaten in the league Auburn, they think this could be the game for Auburn. This rivalry is funny. Have you noticed anything about this rivalry? I got the answer here. I just wonder, when you think Tennessee Auburn, what do you think of?
The fact that Bruce used to coach there and Steven used to play there. That's
Yeah,
the first thing that comes to my mind.
that's a big factor. I'll tell you one stat that pops out. The home court is huge in this rivalry, and Auburn has it this week. Last few games, loss for Auburn at Tennessee, loss for Auburn at Tennessee, win for Auburn at Auburn, loss for Auburn at Tennessee, win for Auburn at Auburn, win for Auburn at Auburn. Auburn's actually the last one 7 games ago in this rivalry to win one on the road at Knoxville. And they're different games. When they're in Auburn, they're a lot more entertaining than when they're at Tennessee. Sometimes I think one of them was 46-43. It was a horrible game to watch, and it was horribly officiated. But the home court is so important in this rivalry, and Auburn gets it this weekend. It'll be a zoo down there, and I think it's so crucial when these two teams play each other, who's at home.
Yeah, and I think because of the history, there's kind of built-in baggage in terms of Bruce Pearl. They want to beat him. Tennessee wants to beat him, and I'm sure it gives the players a little extra motivation. Bruce is not mentioning that in his pregame speech, and that's not a thought in his mind, but that's probably floating around the players' heads a little. And there was a video that Auburn posted from the Texas game. It was Steven talking to the team before the game, and he was saying, win this one for BP, because that was the game that was gonna I don't remember if that was the game that pushed him over to make him. Okay, so he was already tied at that point. And I feel like it's going to be a little bit of the same mentality. Game day's there, but that's also everything that's, I don't want to say on the line, but all the external factors in terms of, it's a top 10 matchup. Game day's coming to town. The whole Bruce Pearl, used to coach there. Sometimes that makes me a little nervous just because there is so much outside noise, if that makes sense to you.
No, it does. I mean, I go back to football side of this, the game of the century, LSU Alabama in 2011. It was a zoo, and game day was there. It was in Tuscaloosa, and I heard Nick Saban say, those type of situations, it's an advantage to be on the road until game time.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of distractions for Auburn with game day and all of that and all the attention until game time. And then you're damn happy that it's inside Neville Arena in front of the jungle right there. So let me ask you, big concern for Auburn. Do you have one? Because for me, at one point, it was the team peaking too early. But I think Johni's injury sort of has tampered that down, sort of pushed that down a little bit. So I don't worry about that anymore. I was sitting here doing my pre-show notes, and when we knew we were going to talk about Auburn concerns, and I don't have one right now. And I'm wondering, when you listen to Bruce or you listen to the players, or you who see these guys in person more than I do, what is a concern for you about this Auburn basketball team right now as the nation's #1 team, unanimous in the AP poll? What is a concern for you? Is there one?
After games, when we've been doing post-game reaction shows, you find yourself having to nitpick a little with this team, be a little harder on things that you might not be as picky about, just because, there isn't a ton of negative, but I think the one thing that we've seen consistently really throughout the entire season, but especially once conference play started, is keeping their foot on the gas. And it's something that Steven Pearl had mentioned when he's been on the next round. I think it might have been his first appearance of the season. He was saying, we're trying to get them not to let up. And I've realized that I don't know if I necessarily think it's them letting up as it is they're getting more cute. They're trying things that are a little bit risky and things that I don't think that they would typically do if it were a one-possession game. But I started looking back. They've had so many games that were down to the wire. The Houston game was close. Second game of the season. The Iowa State game was one on the last possession. Texas came down to the wire. South Carolina came down to the wire. Georgia came down to the wire. In Texas, they were up 21 with 12 minutes left in the second half, end up winning by 5. Georgia, they had a 17-point lead, end up winning by 2. So that's my concern and they've found a way to win these games when they are close, which I think is a great trait to have. And I think it's good having experience, when it comes down to the wire, being able to play clean, being able to play without fouling, being able to hit shots in crucial moments. But at the same time, they're unnecessarily getting themselves into these situations.
Yeah, you almost wish they could do it like they did in Birmingham against nationally ranked Purdue, where they beat them to death and then kept beating them to death all the way until the end. It's a great point by you. We'll stick with that as our biggest concern. So it's Auburn hosting Tennessee. Tennessee at Auburn, Neville Arena, 7:30, main ESPN. And then Taylor will be there for game day. And then for the coverage during the game, post-game reaction, we'll go live. I'll be in Tuscaloosa at Next Round Live. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and everywhere. And set the alert so you'll know when we're doing something, and she'll have full day of coverage down there. Alabama at the same time, 7:30 at home against LSU after beating Vandy this week. It was another 100-point contest for Alabama. They've got 6 this year. They've got 16 since the start of last year, which is number 1 in college basketball. I've got a stat for you here, but you're around this team. You were in Tuscaloosa the other night. Scoring 100 points puts a little sparkle in Nate Oates' eyes. When you think about the way Alabama scores 100, what pops to Taylor Corn's mind?
The fact that they make it look easy. We talked about this on Tuesday night after the game, but you can be watching them play and think that they're not having a great shooting night. If you block out the score at the bottom of the TV screen, not paying attention to that. I mean, there are times when I catch myself thinking, they're not shooting great. And then you look up and they've got 97 points with, 3 minutes left in the game. So they scoring is not a problem for him, for his team, for Nate Oates' teams. And it hasn't been. I mean, the team was the same way last season. Like you just said, 16th time since the beginning of last season, they've scored 100+ point games, which is, crazy.
We'll get to the concern in a second because it sort of is the backside of that. But here's a stat for you. Vandy doesn't fall into this category, but 3 times this year, 3 of the 6, Alabama has scored 100 on a ranked opponent. In Birmingham against Illinois, Illinois was ranked at the time. In Tuscaloosa against Oklahoma, Oklahoma was ranked at the time. They're not anymore. And then up at Rupp Arena against Kentucky, who is a darn good basketball team. The last time anybody has scored 100 or more points against 3 ranked teams in one season was 2002, 23 seasons ago now, Kansas, who went on to the Final Four, didn't win the national championship, but made it to the Final Four. That's the kind of numbers that are being churned out right now. So that gets me to my Alabama concern. I will tell you what it is, and then you tell me what concerns you about Alabama. For me, it is what we saw in the second half. And it's sort of what you're talking about Auburn. Alabama has had a chance to put some teams away, and they don't do that all the time. And they never have 2 really great halves of defense. They allowed Vandy to score, not the most athletic team I've ever seen in person. I know you agree. They allowed them to score 56 second half points the other night. And that is a concern still for me defensively. Now, last year they were defensively challenged at times, and they still made it to the Final Four because they played really good defense in the tournament. But that is still a huge concern for me about this team. Can they do it for 40 minutes on the defensive end of the floor? What about you?
That's defense is my concern as well. They're 16th out of the 16 SEC teams in allowed in the amount of points that they're allowing per game. They're allowing 78.8 points per game. So you look at that and you think, thank God that they score 100 points every other game because they're allowing a lot of points. And I went back and looked at the 6 SEC games that they've played so far and then compared their opponents' average points per game to how many they scored when playing Alabama, just to look at, okay, are these teams just, good offensively? What is there an outlier here? And so Oklahoma scored 79 versus Alabama. Their average is 80. So that's kind of a wash. South Carolina, Alabama held them under their average, 3 points under. Texas A&M scored 13 more points than they were averaging versus Alabama. Kentucky scored 9 more points than they were averaging. Vanderbilt scored 5 more. So that's a little bit of where my concern lies as well, is they're electric offensively. I believe they lead the SEC in points per game, which should come as a surprise to no one. But what happens if shots aren't falling? And you got a lot of guys that can shoot. So you got, you can go deep down the bench and find someone to put on the court that you're confident will hit a shot. But sometimes, you just have an off game shooting. And if your defense is allowing, 80, did I say the average is about 80 points a game, it's hard to get to 80 points if you're having a bad night shooting as a team.
That's right. That's a great point. I'm glad you pulled those stats up. So some of those teams were, a lot of those teams were above their season average when they play Alabama. Keep an eye on Cliff Omoruyi. He was out for about, back in the locker room for about 5 minutes, grabbing his upper right torso. Don't think it was a rib. Think it was more in the shoulder or pec area, but he came back, played the rest of the game fine. We don't know about Derrion Reid for this contest. They are not rushing him back, though he is practicing. They don't want to rush him back because apparently, I was told on Tuesday night, it's one of those injuries that if it's not completely healed, it could be nagging all season long, and you don't want that. So they want to get him right. You had a question from one of our viewers/listeners about style of play. Put that in question for him, because I asked one of our friends who played the game, but where did that come from and what was the question again?
So this was a reply to a video, and the question was about how the type of basketball that SEC, because, my light is strobing right now. I don't know if you're noticing this, but it looks like I'm at a rave. So ignore that. But
where's your glow sticks?
I don't know. I need to pull them out, though, apparently. I don't know what's going on. And my ceilings are way too tall for me to change light bulbs. That's going to have to be dealt with another day. But the question was about how when you're traveling, say Auburn's playing in Tuscaloosa, they're playing with Alabama's basketball. And how does that impact the game, if at all? Because, a different brand, you get used to practicing with the type of ball that your team has at home. And not everyone that you play on the road or, at a neutral site is going to be playing with the same brand. I don't know, how different that really is. But I said that we would discuss it tonight.
Yeah. And we will have to discuss it another night because I misunderstood your question. And I called in our friend Brian Passing. And when you said style or brand of basketball, I took it as up-tempo, slow down, really good defensively. So I misunderstood the question. So that's the question I asked Brian Passing.
Okay, well, we can talk about that too.
That's a great question about the style of the actual ball of the basketball.
Yeah.
Because some teams use a different one, and then they get to the NCAA tournament, and it is more bouncy every year and not as grippy when you get to the NCAA tournament. Yeah. You have to adjust to that. So I will ask that question to a couple of people, and we'll have it for you. Let's do that on the fan question one when we'll have that one for you Monday morning.
Yeah.
But by the way, on the question I asked Brian Passing about different styles of basketball, he put Alabama, Kentucky, and Florida. Vandy's trying to do it in the up-tempo offenses. He put Tennessee, A&M, Mississippi State, South Carolina, and probably Oklahoma in the slow it down, muck it up style of offenses. And then he put Auburn, Arkansas, LSU, Georgia, and Missouri somewhere in between where they're really good at playing both styles of basketball. And when you watch those teams play, he says it can be a grind if you're on the road playing one of those, Tennessee A&M like teams, Mississippi State. And then if you're playing up tempo with an Alabama or a Kentucky, if you fall into that kind of game, it could be troublesome. But he likes the way that Auburn, can play both styles of basketball, and that benefits them to be able to do that. And it will benefit them greatly when they play Tennessee this weekend. If you watch an Alabama game, Ole Miss was able to, even in Tuscaloosa, was able to drag Alabama into their style of play. And, that becomes a big fight. Being versatile and be able to win those kind of games can help you a lot. Boy, I like that other question a lot better. I'll do better next time.
No,
Look
well,
at Go ahead.
don't worry. I was about to say don't worry about it, but I'm not surprised that the communication was off there because I was not typing it. I was speaking into my phone since I was driving.
Yep.
I forgot to mention it before we left the studio earlier, and so I still have no clue what the text actually said. So that was probably my error.
I do that more than anybody up here
Yeah.
at the Next Round family. I am a voice to text, so you guys have gotten used to just looking past the miswordings and why does it say pineapple? What's he talking about here? Oh, pine trees. Okay, you guys are very forgiving of me. This weekend, my question for the games coming up is who needs wins? Here's the slate for Saturday. It's our final topic here. Brought to you by our friends at Roback.com. Promo code TNR20 gets you 20% off. If you crave activity like Taylor and I think both of us got a little gym time in today, then you can go to Roback.com. Great golf gear as well. Are you laughing because you don't think I really went to the gym? Or?
No, I'm laughing because I didn't go to the gym.
You always crave activity, though.
Yeah, always.
And then mybookie.ag, we're both very active there as well. Promo code next round gets you into that. Mississippi State, South Carolina starts the day off. Kentucky's at Vandy. Texas A&M's at Texas. Georgia's at Florida. Ole Miss is at Missouri. Oklahoma's at Arkansas. Of course, LSU, Alabama, Tennessee, Auburn. Who needs a win? And you can go more than one team, but who needs a win in your opinion?
South Carolina needs a win. This light is driving me insane. South Carolina needs a singular win. They need to win one.
Your heart's too kind. Your heart's too kind.
What kills me is that is what I thought about the entire Arkansas game last night. I just kept sitting there and I was like, these guys are so close. They're so close and they need it so bad because it is such a long season. And imagine how demoralizing it is. Night in and night out, trotting out there, trying to motivate yourself to get up and go to the gym, give your full effort at practice, and then losing every game. Like that, it hurts my heart for them because they put so much time and so much energy and effort into this. Like, I mean, I don't want any of them to beat Auburn, but I hope they win one somewhere else. And so I think they need one for the morale of the season. They need something to give them a little start. And this isn't really in my need category, but this is in a, hey, you got a great opportunity this weekend category. And that's Arkansas. They have Oklahoma at home. And I think that this is a really good opportunity for them to kind of, change the trajectory of the way that their season has been going and win back-to-back games, their first two conference games.
I'm the asshole on the show. I think the team that needs the win is Mississippi State, who's playing at winless South Carolina. Mississippi State's a really good basketball team, and they're 3-3 in the league. They don't need to lose this game. They need a win badly, Mississippi State at South Carolina, because they're at home to Alabama coming up next week, I think next Wednesday night. So Mississippi State could use this South Carolina win, get to 4-3 in the league, and then try to rattle Alabama's cages at the hump coming up on Wednesday night. And the other team that needs to win, and this is true, is Georgia's a really good basketball team, but they're 2-4 in the league. And they're on the road at Florida. It's a rivalry, and they're on the road in Gainesville, and they're 2-4. That team's too good to be 2-5 in the SEC. So they need a win this weekend.
That's what I think is going to be throughout the season as conference play continues on. I think that that's going to be a common denominator that we're seeing with a lot of teams is why do you have the number of conference losses you have? Because you're good. But it's because everyone else is good too, I guess, except South Carolina, which I'm rooting for them.
Yeah. But see, I don't think we thought, how many has Auburn played now? They played 5 and didn't play midweek. 5-0 is realistic, but if they get to be 8-0, 9-0, 10-0, if Alabama, if they're on a 7-game win streak when Auburn comes to town, if we get our way to February 15th and Auburn's still unbeaten in the league and Alabama's only got 1 loss, that'll be a huge game. But that'll mean a lot of really good SEC teams have been beaten by Auburn and Alabama a lot at that point, and they would have stacked up some losses where we thought there'd be a little bit more parity. like we thought maybe 4 or 5 losses would win the league. Man, we're at February 15th and Auburn's got a 0 and Alabama's got a 1 in the loss column. Who knows what the winning record is going to be at that point? And that just means the Mississippi States and them of the world have taken a couple more losses than we thought they may in the course of this season. Man, it was a fun show. I really
That was
enjoyed
fun.
Yeah,
I did too.
I'm ready to go with another basketball weekend. I will tell you that I'm hating that the basketball season is.
Don't do this.
It does. It seems like it's going fast. We're going to be.
Don't do this.
We're going to be 5 Saturdays from Selection Sunday. I think this Saturday or next Saturday. We're getting to it, man. But it is so fun. You enjoy your trip to Auburn. I know you always do. You'll make a weekend of it. I'll enjoy my trip to Tuscaloosa, and then we'll be right back in these 2 double boxes on Saturday night after the game. Do you have a final thought?
I hope that it's as entertaining of a weekend as it was a night last night, because that was so fun to watch. And also, I'm waiting for the day that Auburn and Alabama, days that they're both playing, don't play at the same time, because I hate having to miss one of the games. I don't like it at all. Oh, also, side note, which I meant to talk to you about this morning. Did you notice last night that I think that might have been one of the first times that a game actually finished in an hour and 55 minutes, under 2 hours, and there wasn't
Really?
overlap to where you had to go to ESPN News and break up the darts tournament to watch the beginning of one of the games. So I was like, okay,
That
this is
is
progress,
good.
I guess.
Did you notice the SEC Network start times this week? 12 noon. Then the next game on the SEC Network, 2:30. Then the next game on the SEC Network, 5 o'clock. Then the next game, 7:30. 2.5 hours for game
They must
time.
be listening to us.
Way to go, SEC Network. All right,
Yeah, we're
that's the
figuring things out.
That's the basketball show. Enjoy the weekend, everybody, and make sure to set your alerts. Give us a thumbs up and comment.